And Anushka, there we go. Okay. So we're going to record the session so that we can share it on our website afterwards, and ICLEI can do that as well. So if any folks were not able to join today, that they can do that. So welcome everybody, and thanks so much for joining us for this session today. This is something I've been wanting to do for about a year. First time I came across this really amazing website, climateinsight.ca, and so we're focusing on how we can use this website as a teaching tool in post-secondary. But I recognize that some of the people who have joined the call today are working in other capacities in post-secondary institutions, and some of you also may not be working with universities or colleges, but be interested and have a stake in post-secondary education somehow. So that's our topic, teaching with climate insight and thinking about how instructors can use this resource in their teaching. And this is being hosted by the University of Waterloo Climate Institute, and I'm Michele Martin. I'll tell you a little bit more about the Climate Institute in a bit. And we've got our special guest, Sheri Young, who's with ICLEI Canada, and she's the project director for this amazing resource. And Sheri, I'll pass it over to you a little bit in a little bit. So let me just go to our next slide here. So there we go. Sorry, there are the two of us there. So I'm here at the University of Waterloo in my capacity as a climate training program specialist, and I also coordinate climate education initiatives at the university and a project I'll tell you about in a minute. And Sheri, do you want to just save it? Do you want to say anything now
I
about
just
yourself?
button. There we go. No, I'm good. I mean, you kind of summarized it all. I'm happy to be here. And as Michele said, she's been trying to get this going since our launch, really, for a year. We launched our first version last year, October. So I'm happy to be here and talking to our colleagues from universities from across the nation. So
Wonderful. Thanks. And please, to all of you, use the chat. I mean, we made this as a Zoom meeting, not a webinar, because we invite participation from everybody who's present. It's more of a workshop. So you have the capacity to unmute yourselves and ask questions, put things in the chat. But to start off with, if you want to share your name, your organization, and whatever discipline you're most affiliated with in the chat, that would be great so that other people can see who's in the room here today. And I wanted to kickstart before we dive right in with a land acknowledgement, recognizing that we are probably all calling in from very different parts of Turtle Island. I love this painting by Norval Morrisseau, who is or was an Anishinaabe painter here in Ontario. This piece is called Androgyny, but when you look at it, to me, it's like a really beautiful reminder of how we're connected to the land and to each other and to all creatures. And so no matter where we live, we have these connections, and we also, of course, have a responsibility to whatever we're doing, to try to help our students. So those of us who work in post-secondary institutions, to try to help our students connect to the land, connect to different plants, animals, and also learn about what Indigenous folks are doing, and try also to collaborate with Indigenous partners that live near us as we engage in climate learning and climate action and support the work that's being led by Indigenous folks. And so here in Waterloo, where I live, we're part of the Haldeman Tract, and this is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral peoples. And it's a pretty wonderful place to live and work, I gotta say. It's really great. So if you want to share your territories in the chat too, please go ahead. And another thing I wanted to say is, yeah, this climate education work that probably a lot of us are engaged in, and that's what this webinar is in support of, is to me, it's a really easy fit to align what we're trying to do in terms of climate learning and climate action with reconciliation action as well. So that's maybe something to keep in mind as we move forward through this webinar, where those connections are. So these are the objectives of the workshop. It's to really get in and explore that ICLEI climateinsight.ca platform and think about how this resource can be integrated into the curriculum. And I'll tell you in a minute about a project that we're doing at Waterloo to try to accelerate climate change education and planning engineering, those subjects that you see on the screen. And so we're obviously trying to support them, but we really welcome people who are calling in from other disciplines as well. and really want to try to provide a space for post-secondary educators to connect with each other, but also with practitioners, which is great because I think we probably have some practitioners in the room too, and create this professional learning community where people are coming together because they want to make sure that the next generation of folks who are heading out into their careers are ready to deal with climate change. And so it's also space to get some inspiration. I'm looking forward to getting inspired by Sheri and all of you as well. It's a space for sharing too. So we'd like to hear from all of you. Sorry, I got a little repeat on this slide. So here's a little on the right side of the slide. You can see just a tour. I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction, and then I'm going to hand it over to Sheri. She's going to give us a tour, which is going to be interactive as well. There'll be lots of opportunities to ask questions and guide what Sheri does with us for that part of it. After that, we wanted to have a bit of discussion, and if we're a small group, we'll probably just all stay in the same room. And if we end up with quite a big group by that time, we might split into 2 or 3 breakout rooms to have a conversation about like what are the nitty-gritty of how could you use this actually in your teaching. For those of you who are instructors, how would you use this in the content, developing lessons, activities in class, or assignments that you might want to give your students. So we'll have some time for that, and then we'll do a wrap up. Okay. Okay, I'm going to launch a little poll, a little Zoom poll, just to see who's in the room here. So let me get my thing over here, launch the poll. Hang on a minute. Here we go. Oh, here we are. Okay, so you should be seeing a poll there. And the first question is, what discipline are you affiliated with? And it might be none of those, in which case it's other. And the second question is, have you ever heard of this climateinsight.ca website? And then the next one is like basically, if yes, have you ever actually used it? Both might be maybes, who knows? Okay, we see the results coming in here. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results with all of you. So you can see, okay, we have quite a few folks from outside, some planning, some engineering, and folks from other disciplines as well. And probably if you look in the chat, you'll see some of the disciplines that people are coming in from. Looks like quite a few people have heard of Climate Insight and a few not, a few maybes. And in terms of ever using it, one person has, so that'll be great. And actually, when we have the discussion afterwards, it'll be really cool to hear from you and what you did with it. Okay, so that's where we're at now. So I think probably the no is that's a good reason why we're having this webinar to share with people. Okay, I'll stop sharing that and close the poll. Hopefully everything's under control from your ends over there. Thanks for sharing, everybody. Okay, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the Waterloo Climate Institute. We're based at the University of Waterloo, and we were set up in 2008. Actually, we grew out of the Faculty of Environment, but now we actually are under the Office of Research at University of Waterloo, and we're connected to all 6 faculties at University of Waterloo. So we have researchers from all 6 faculties who are members of the Climate Institute, and we exist as a hub to facilitate interdisciplinary climate research, also training, capacity building and education, and knowledge mobilization. So that's especially in terms of working with the profs and the researchers to help them share their research findings that then can inform decision makers and so on. So that's us. But actually, I started working for the Climate Institute a couple of years ago, and my colleague Jenny is on the call too. A few other my colleagues from the Climate Institute are on the call. And for the last couple of years, we've been actually doing a lot more work in education and training and capacity building. And so that's become like a bit more of a more important function of the Climate Institute right now. And in April 2024, we got funding from Natural Resources Canada to do this project to accelerate climate education in professional degree programs in Canada. And it doesn't focus on every single professional degree program. There's really a focus on accounting, engineering, planning, architecture, landscape architecture, and accounting. Did I say accounting already? So those five key disciplines. And this project will carry on to the end of December. And in fact, this webinar is part of that project. So the project has three components. The first was a national needs assessment or survey that we did last year, and we published the findings in April this year. And you can find that QR code will take you to the I think it takes you to the project report. It might take you to our website, the project website. And then the component B is for us here at Waterloo to look at revising and updating our curriculum to make sure that climate adaptation and mitigation to a lesser extent are reflected in the programs that we're offering in those disciplines. And the third component is about and providing opportunities for, especially for instructors and program leads from different institutions across the country in those disciplines, especially to be able to connect with each other, share resources. And so this is under this supporting communities of practice. This webinar falls under that. Falls under that. I just have this one slide just to share with you some of the results from that survey that we did. And again, we just focused on those particular disciplines. In fact, we didn't even really include landscape architecture because we don't have a landscape architecture program here. So we reached out to folks who offer these programs across the country to find out more about what they're doing. And I got to say, not every institution participated in the survey, but we had decent numbers, except in accounting. We had pretty low response rate in accounting. And it's probably biased in terms of the accounting programs that are maybe more interested in this work. So you can see there, like the degree more in architecture and planning programs, we saw higher levels of integration of climate change into their programs. But on the right, those findings here of what the institutions were telling us in terms of the supports that are needed. This is help developing or redesigning courses, access to relevant teaching and learning resources and tools like Climate Insight, and professional development for faculty members. So, we actually held another webinar back in early October, which introduced people to different climate change education resources, and you can find the link on YouTube. There's a recording of that that's available on our website as well. So that's why we're having this webinar. We will carry on doing these types of things as well. And so we've done some other work too. We've been working with our faculty members and collaborating with some other institutions around in Waterloo region to help professors develop skills in climate pedagogy. So on the left there, that's a report that we put together after we held a symposium. And we just had another one last week as well. And there's the link to the report that I just showed the results of if you want to have a look at that. So that's what the Climate Institute is doing. And I just wanted to also share this slide with you because this is a kind of fun thing that the Institute developed with the Games Institute a few years ago. And it's a sort of an introductory kind of quiz virtual game, simulation game that is not bad. Like it was developed for middle school, high school, but actually for first year university or so on, it's a pretty good little snapshot to test people's knowledge of climate change in this. So that's a resource that we have to share. But enough about the Climate Institute. Let's hear from Sheri about what ICLEI's got going for us. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Sheri to share her screen, and then she's going to walk us through her screen. So over to you, Sheri. Looking good.
Unmute. Yep. Okay. You can see my screen. We're good.
Looks good.
Okay. Thanks for that, Michele. Yeah, Michele and I were excited about planning this. Partly because I did a stint in postsecondary, but I worked in the facilities side, and I worked a lot with talking to professors and trying to integrate that the academic approach and the facilities approach. So if everybody's on the call, no matter what discipline you're in, as Michele said earlier, whether you're upstairs or downstairs, as we say at universities, I think that hopefully there's some tools here that will help you in your day-to-day. I am, as Michele said, I do work for ICLEI Canada, who are based out of Toronto, but I am still here in Calgary, working from home and representing the prairies for our organization. So it's really good. We do collaborate with partners from across Canada. I have colleagues in BC and Calgary and Alberta and all over. So we try to make tools that are applicable no matter where you are in the country. I got to make sure I'm on the right screen here. There we go. So Climate Insight, since I left actually my university days, I left to lead the development of this very cool project that I'm happy to share with you today. It's a free online platform funded in part by the federal government that's really aimed at municipalities and communities to provide a level of understanding and a level of capacity building on climate and infrastructure as they apply for projects and try to integrate those climate resilience and low carbon considerations into their project planning. This is our timeline. As I mentioned earlier, we launched our first MVP, so our very first version, in October last year. We just had our 1-year anniversary, which we're very excited about, and we have bigger and cooler functionalities that come with every release. It's a 5-year project, so we just finished release 3 of 7. So every 6 months we upgrade with more functions and more content every month to make sure that we are staying current on what's happening out there and to reply to the needs of users that are in our working groups, that are in our municipal advisory groups, to make sure that the content is applicable, up to date, and usable. So I'm going to put a plug in there if anybody sees what they like here and they're like, oh, I'd like to be involved in that or help develop it over the next few years. We do have working groups, so you're welcome to join and help us create what it goes on. So in October, we did release 3. The basic pieces of our site, which I'll walk you through in a minute, are our maps. So we have a really good geospatial element to the map. We have some tools that really are helpful, some embedded tools, and then some links to other tools, in case the tools that we have on our site aren't quite what you're looking for. And then we have just integrated a really cool new tool that's an embedded rapid risk assessment that really helps identify the consequences and impacts and overall risk of some hazards, of 4 key hazards for communities across Canada. And then we also have a new map layer, which actually we didn't have for release 3, but we were able to get right after that, which identifies energy poverty as well. So that's a really cool way of integrating and we have some other social vulnerability layers, which I'll show. And then there's a section on learning. So I mentioned it's a 4-year journey. We're on release 3 of 5, and it's part of a larger ecosystem support. So we're part of a 3-part toolkit. The platform is your kind of resource and tools repository. There's also the expert roster. So the Climate Ready Infrastructure Service that supports smaller municipalities with less than 30,000 people to match them with experts, to help them integrate climate awareness and climate factors into their projects. And then there's also the Climate Help Desk through Housing, Infrastructure and Communities Canada that will answer any questions on climate and infrastructure that they are able to for communities. So there's lots of tools out there available. Okay, so now I'm going to hop right in. Let me just change my, okay. Can everybody see Climate Insight? This is the landing page for Climate Insight. So when you go to climateinsight.ca, or it's all available in French as well at climateinsight.ca, you'll get to a landing page that will encourage you to either get a guided assistance project if you have an idea of one already, maybe explore some maps that we've got, or dive right into our new tool. I usually like to tell people to start with the map. And because I'm biased and in Alberta, I picked an Alberta community. But if anybody wants to throw a community into the chat or unmute themselves and throw out a community they'd like me to walk me through, I can absolutely show your specific community on the map. Oh, I think somebody came up with a new message. Toronto. Oh, Toronto is a lot. We can do Toronto. So Cochrane is smaller, but we can absolutely do Toronto. There's lots. I did want to mention that that Climate Insight is designed for communities less than 500,000. It's really for those small to mid-sized communities. As you can see, there's a lot of information for Toronto. I can show you Edmonton really quick because that also came up in the chat. You can see there's lots of layers of Ontario, layers here. And so I'm going to explain really quickly what these layers mean. I mentioned earlier, we have social vulnerability layers. We also imported climate layers as well as, so we have climate layers, infrastructure layers, and social vulnerability layers. So what you find when you get to the map, first of all, Victoria might be a good one to try because it's smaller. Is you will find that you'll get this base level. So there we go, moving across. And you can feel free to follow along or to access Climate Insight on your own laptops if you'd like. So I'm going to try Victoria here because I know that there's some areas of Victoria that has some really great social vulnerability layers. So on the left here, you'll have your layers. So you'll have climate layers and social vulnerability layers. As you see, there's an overall social vulnerability index. It changes a little bit with some of the sub-pillars that are in here. Is it loading? There we go. So as you can see, this is your ethnocultural composition in Victoria. This is residential instability. So that's people like people that are renting or high turnover in some of that. Situational vulnerability. This is people who may have a lower education level, maybe have some mobility issues, maybe they're elderly. And then we also have their energy poverty index, which we're really excited about. So this is about people who have a hard time meeting or can't access the adequate levels of energy that they need to power their homes. So that's what these different layers are. So feel free to look around on those. I'm going to focus on heat today because a lot of people tend to look at flooding. We know it's crucial and things like that, but I'm going to pick heat as a hazard. You can see that there's heat proxies here. There's drought proxies. There's flood proxies down here. All these climate data is pulled from climatedata.ca. But we're going to look at days maximum temperature, and we're going to mix it with residential instability. So we're going to see what's the turnover or what are the people that are most at risk for heat in rental units. That's kind of what this is, that maybe don't have control over their environment because they rent or things like that. So as you can see on the map here, some of these darker blue or the darker teal is people who are more vulnerable. And then I'm going to scroll up and go to mid-century. So right now, heat is not that big a deal in Victoria. But if we go to mid-century, heat is going to take a little bit more of an impact. And as you can see, the colors get darker. And if I click on this area right here that shows higher vulnerability, the baseline, they get 1 day over 30 degrees. Mid-century, they'll get 7, but by the end of century, they're projected to have 23 days over 30 degrees. Now, that's a big change for people living in perhaps residential units that they don't have air conditioning, that maybe don't have other climate factors, that maybe they don't have access to green spaces where they can cool down, things like that. So this projects to end of century. So this is not a big deal now, but all the infrastructure that we're building will need to adapt and cater to the needs for some of these communities later. Now, what you can also see, this is released in release 2, is as a hazard profile for this area. So what this does, can people now see the hazard profile, not the map? Yes? Okay. So what this does is it summarizes a bit of the information that's happening in that dissemination area. And that's the dissemination areas are associated with the StatsCan. It's the smallest area that StatsCan collects data on. So it tells you the population of that dissemination area and kind of where it is. And then the likelihood scores for each of the hazards that we've assessed. Now we've plugged these through, and these likelihood scores are based on a model that we've created for that area. And what they mean is in Victoria, in this area that we're looking at, there's a medium likelihood of extreme heat in this location now. By the end of century, there will be a medium to high likelihood of extreme heat. We have the same factors for flooding. Permafrost thaws off because, as far as I know, there's no permafrost in Victoria. And then they're at a high risk of wildfire, which anybody on the island knows that there's quite a few. There's lots of forests and lots of green space in Victoria itself. So these are things that will need to be taken into consideration in the future. I'm just going to go back to the map and point out, I mentioned that there's all infrastructure layers. So if you're thinking about your vulnerable populations in a heat emergency, or as you get more numbers of hot days, you might want to focus on some of the facilities that those people use or some of the infrastructure that the people in those situations might be more dependent on, and make those a higher priority. So I put recreational and for sport facilities. I don't know how it works in Victoria, but our recreation center in Southern Alberta here is used as an evacuation place and a cooling center. So we want to make sure that maybe the cooling center can withstand a certain amount of data or of heat, right? And it can meet the requirements of the people in that area. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit more because the box keeps coming up too low. Okay, there's the residential instability index. What I'd like to look is at the summary of these. So browse features. This shows me that Glasgow Park is right here. So as we know, during COVID and also we know during heat emergencies, people access parks more often because they have natural cooling tendencies. So if you're too hot in your apartment, you're probably going to head to the park to cool off, especially if you can't go very far, you don't have a lot of transportation, maybe you have mobility issues or things like that. So maybe I want to focus on the status of this park. Maybe I want to focus on an arena or a local cooling facility. And I can identify ones in high need areas. So what do we do with this information? If I want more information on this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop over next to our rapid risk assessment. Now you can access that by going back to the main page and going to the rapid risk assessment. And I'm going to show you what that looks like really quickly because I filled one out for Cochrane originally. But what you're going to do is, if anyone's heard of a PIVC assessment or the BARC assessments, these are intensive vulnerability assessments that you conduct on the infrastructure in your community or on a specific piece of infrastructure in your community. They often take 6 to 12 months to do an overall risk assessment and drill down and get all the information. We call this a rapid risk assessment because it can take you a couple of hours or a couple of sittings. You can do it with the information you collect with some of your colleagues. So you probably need to make some friends or reach across some silos to get some information to fill it in here, but it won't take you 6 to 12 months with an overall for a snapshot or an overall view of your risk assessment. So I chose buildings to go on our example of using a rec center as a cooling center, for example. I've keyed in all the information ahead of time so you guys didn't have to wait while everything loaded. I chose the Cochrane Plaza as an example building. Some of this information you might not have on hand. You can talk to your asset manager, or you can talk to whoever knows a little bit more about that building, and it'll bring it up. And it'll bring up your hazard profile. Is this the hazard profile for it? Yes. So there's your hazard profile for Cochrane. And I'm going to go, and then it identifies those same, I turned off flooding because I didn't want to focus on that today, but it identifies the likelihood of any of these hazards hitting your community. So I've decided to focus on extreme heat and wildfire here because those are things that are a big deal here in Alberta. So it'll pull up those two tabs and it'll automatically populate the likelihood data from this hazard profile over here. So this one has extreme heat as a high likelihood. As you can see, it's already populated here. Now, extreme heat doesn't mean you have high risk from extreme heat. This is the likelihood of high temperatures hitting your community. If you know, for wildfire, for example, if you know that your wildfire, you can see that I've put 4 in here, even though our hazard profile identifies it as 1. Now, if you know you're bordering on a community that are, you know, that in town you don't have a lot of fuel for wildfire, but you're border on a forest, this is what likelihood of it hitting your of a wildfire taking off in your community. But if you border on a forest or a natural area that has higher likelihood, you might want to check around what your borders are and increase your likelihood, because if those interfaces have higher risk than the data shows. So then that's what I did. I increased manually, checking with my local data, saying we share a border with Rocky View County that has higher likelihood of wildfire. So I overruled that. I know I speak quickly, but there's a lot of data to get through. So I just wanted to kind of walk you through quickly. Now, some of this, so what you do to get risk is you combine consequence with your likelihood. So consequence scoring, we have an in-depth kind of number of questions here to walk you through thinking about what things might impact the consequences of heat or other things in your community, heat and wildfire in this situation. So you can go through, and this is where you'd want to talk to your colleagues from across the organization, because you might not have all the information you need. So you answer general questions to think more about the asset and its consequences. On public safety, there's sections here. Now these bottom sections are, they have questions to review and to think about some of your consequences. And then you're asked to rate the consequences of each of these sections. So public health and safety, if heat went through, what would the impact be on your community? On your public health of your community? What would the impact be on the local economy? And so you rate that. What would the impact be on community, lifestyle, environment, sustainability, and public administration? And there's questions that prompt this. Now, your overall consequence score will be based on the highest ranked from the 5 sections that you're evaluating. And then you go on and do the next hazard. The same thing for the next hazard. So I skipped through all this just to make it easy because you guys can play with it later in your own communities. It takes you to a summary document, right? Which will show you the overall risk rankings based on my answers. And this for extreme heat, what I answered for each section and what the overall risk is, and then the wildfire as well, because it's a combination of likelihood and the impacts I chose and the consequences I chose, we're high for wildfire. So what do I do now? Recommendations for this would say, okay, well, obviously, if I have high likelihood, I should probably go and do a PI/BC, so a more extensive. This is a quick way of saying, okay, maybe I need to focus on a PI/BC of this facility for wildfire impacts. It's really, and so then you can maybe take this to council. We have a handy little PDF here that you can download and attach to your council presentations or any of your strategic requests for your upper leadership to ask for budget to go forward, things like that. It's a really cool tool. It really does help with a couple hours of time and some input to give yourself, to give your council or to give your leadership a good picture of what the climate hazards are in your area. But now what, right? Then what do you do? Well, we have a tool for that too. So now that you know, you have a picture of your risk and things for your community. Maybe you already know that. You don't have to do the risk assessment. Awesome. You've already paid for it. You can go to our solutions finder. So this one here, back to the main page, solutions finder. Now what this is a series of questions that will help you take a look at what solutions are available for the type of infrastructure that you have. So I'm going to say, you can go learn a bit about more, like, oh, I need to know some more, and I'll show you that in a minute. But here I'm going to go, yes, show me options. And I'm not any of these things, remote, rural, or in this example, but if I am, it'll streamline some of the questions or some of the answers a little bit more, the suggested options. I'm going to go through adaptation because we're talking about extreme heat. You can also see what kind of mitigation options are available for your building. And after answering a bunch of these questions, which I'm going to skip through because there are a number of questions and I want to leave time for everybody to play around with it and have a discussion. But as you go through a bunch of these, you answer all the questions and it gives you this list over here of results based on in response to the questions, the project-specific questions, and community-specific questions that you've answered. So as you can see, we've tagged low carbon resilience for ones that do both mitigation and adaptation. We've flagged nature-based solutions, and we flagged ones that are good for housing because that seems to be a focus of our federal government right now. So we wanted to flag and make sure that people who are building affordable housing and building housing make sure it's resilient as it's going forward. So these are some of the suggested options and solutions to address extreme heat for my project, which is a building in Cochrane. Green means it aligns really well with the questions that I answered, based on the questions I answered. Blue means, oh, maybe it wasn't aligned so well, has 75% alignment with my questions. It might still work in my situation, but isn't as quickly aligned. Yellow means less aligned, obviously, maybe with a bit of work. And if there were stuff that really didn't align with my choices, they'd show up here. They still show up here, but they show up in gray. Like, maybe this isn't what you're looking for. But just in case, this is what somebody might mention. So if you wanted to look at some of those things, I pulled up one of the examples. This is what we call kind of a content card or a solutions card. And it talks about water heat sinks. Say maybe that's what I want to put in place around my facility. It tells you what it does, what kind of adaptation mitigation results it might have, or connections it might have, how it works, and then all these considerations that might factor into your decision. So kind of a cost range, expected useful life, some of the co-benefits of putting heat water sinks heat sinks into your area, some of the trade-offs, what you can and can't do if you put this in, and EDI factors, as well as some of the factors that impact feasibility. So really what this does is it gives you a snapshot. If you don't know a whole lot about heat sinks, it'll give you a snapshot of what a heat sink can do, the benefits, and what to consider when you're applying it. You can take that and save it to an account and collect a bunch of these cards, kind of like, I'll date myself and say Monopoly cards, but maybe it's like Pokemon cards, like whatever the kind of game that you like to play. You can gamify climate change, but collect these cards and then attach them to maybe your risk assessment and say, okay, this was our risk. This is my PDF of our assessed risk. These are the options that we want to consider to address the infrastructure in this area. And you can save these and print them off or share them with your teams and get more information about them. Now, these are, maybe now you're going to do an RFP for your recreation center and you want to consider some of the things. You can talk to your consultant. You can maybe talk to your leadership or your engineering teams that make sure that you plan things. Maybe you can talk to an academic the academics on the call that would know a little bit more about that or have more research on some of these. This is an overview of maybe you consider this. There's another one here, facility heating. So you can compare them against each other, save them in your account. That's what this is. I've already saved this one, obviously. And then refer back to them later. All sorts of things. Yeah, there are various options here. Now, if you're like, oh, I feel a little bit overwhelmed, you need to go back a few steps, or you want to go, okay, well, how important is it for me to actually factor something into my project? If you go back to your homepage, so click here, and you click on Learn at the top here, it will take you to this page here, which is Understanding Climate Change. So maybe you want to know how to integrate equity components into your project. Maybe you want to know a little bit more about climate risks. Maybe you want to know some of the costs. Or maybe you've done your risk assessment, you've looked at a list of solutions, and you're like, well, do I need to put these solutions in? How bad can it be? What are the impacts? So you go and click on climate impacts here, and it'll open up, because it's a building in our example, these cards, which are summaries of the physical and community impacts, direct and indirect impacts of various hazards on your facilities. So I clicked on buildings here, and I scroll down. It gives you a summary of kind of the status and the condition from the Canada Infrastructure Report card, that tells you municipal facilities are in like relatively fair condition, and across Canada. And then you can scroll down to, okay, we're looking at extreme heat. What are the structural elements that extreme heat will impact on my building? There's the roof. There's a picture of the roof. There's the foundation, other above grade assemblies, and then non-structural elements like interior mechanical systems, things like that. And then it keeps you to, we went through the solutions finder and found things for our project. But if you want to know just what the extreme heat solutions are for buildings without ranked at all, you can click here. It'll automatically populate the library with a list of options available for you. Wildfire is the same. And because we have wildfire data from cost data from insurance companies, we've included some of that in these cards. You can see what the actual costs are from that impact of wildfire on communities. So, and then if you scroll down, there's a section here on indirect impacts, because impacts of each of the hazards tend to shut down communities or interfere with the community's ability to provide services, whether it's from flood or heat or something like that. The indirect impacts are summarized kind of generally for all of the hazards in here. And sometimes where they're broken down, for example, smoke, we'll address those individually, but you can look at all of those. So that is your 50,000 foot overview of all of the tools that are in Climate Insight from an adaptation point of view. I'll quickly look at the library to shortcut the mitigation point of view, because we also have mitigation tools in here. If that's the area you work in. So I know for facilities people, we often look at reducing our energy consumption or trying to really address things around infrastructure for those for energy use. So you can just like shortcut and choose this here, or you can go through the solutions finder like I showed you earlier. We do have a high-level baseline emissions calculator that you can do for your various asset types, and it will give you an estimate by asset class of what your based on either your energy data or an estimate on the type of an archetype of a kind of building. And you can go through here and you can save these results so that you can see what the difference would be or what you're starting with for your emissions. So it's a very cool tool that's embedded right in the program, right in the platform. If anybody's ever done a greenhouse gas assessment, or if people in your classes, if you're teaching architecture, you're teaching buildings, and you would like to have a quick look at the type of building and what kind of emissions might be associated with it, you can take a look here and integrate that into some of your curriculum or into some of your work. So on that note, I'm going to finish up with, I touched base on the other two parts of the toolkit. You can get expert support here. If you wanted to contact the expert roster, you can contact the help desk and they will get back to you with some research and programs that are available, funding programs for some of these. So that's a really great place to go. Or if you wanted more information on how to use Climate Insight or what it means, the folks at the Climate Health Desk are really great. And if I spoke really fast and you forgot where this recording's not out yet, and right after this, you were like, oh, what did you say about? We have a bunch of webinars and 90-second videos to kind of walk you through some of the tools on Climate Insight. So I'm going to put it back to the group because I know that's a lot of information. But I really think for post-secondary, from a facilities point of view, we've often said that post-secondary campuses and municipalities and communities have a very similar kind of structure. I know at our university, it was about the same size as the town that I'd worked in, with lots of infrastructure components that can really be applied. So this can be applied to those as well. And then for the instructors, I think we'll chat about that in a bit next, hey, Michele, and how we can integrate some of this into teaching the students that are coming up and going to be working in these things, and integrating some of these climate considerations into their work, how you can help get that awareness out for the next generation of people working in infrastructure and climate, because it's not just people working for municipalities or just people working engineers. There's a little bit for everybody, for every discipline. So I think that's our next step. I'll pass it back to Michele to kick that piece off.
Thanks, Sheri. There are a few questions in the chat or comments, like Sheri Ann. So I don't know if you can access the chat now. You might want to address that, where she's asking about the sources of data. I mean, and there's another question in there.
Oh, good. Yeah, I couldn't see everything all at the same time. So now I can see. Okay, so yes, so there is a section on data methodology if you want some more information on that. But all the climate data comes from climatedata.ca. The likelihood data comes from a really cool modeling system that pulls climate data as well as likelihood data from that HICC, so Housing Infrastructure and Communities Canada, has pulled in a really modern kind of way. The social and there's more information on that. I'm not the data expert here. That's my colleague, the engineering director. So there's 3 levels, I think, of explanation of data methodologies. There's like your overview for people like me. There's your, and then there's your really intense, for academics, explanation of data methodology in a document. If you look at the footer, hang on, let me just share my screen again. There's a data methodologies document that talks all about.
No, you're not sharing your screen.
I know, I'm just getting in there.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I'll just see data source and methods is right here. It breaks it down by section of by all the geospatial and the tools, and it'll tell you exactly where all the stuff is, where everything is pulled from and how it's done in methodologies. I think you had a second question there. Mitigation adaptation on our regenerative solutions. Absolutely, there's regenerative solutions. We include nature-based solutions, and we really have, restoring marshes and wetlands are part of that. Building the forest canopy, building the urban canopy, things like that. So, and then mitigation. There are a lot of solutions that are based on like reducing your emissions or implementing that. If you select new construction, then those are your preventative solutions as well. And some of the regenerative stuff I think that you're focusing on mostly the nature-based solutions and regenerative so that you get carbon negative outputs. I think that you'll find that they're in there. That's just not quite the focus, since our targeted users are staff working, staff and admin working like on actual projects. So trying to integrate some of the solutions, which can be regenerative, but will address preventative work on adaptation as well, and emissions. We'll address those as well. It's just I think it's not quite presented quite like that. Let's see.
Thanks. And there's another question about how to come up with scores, I think, from Boschko.
Yeah. So how to hazard score and solution effectiveness score are determined. So that's also so the hazard score is if you're talking about the likelihood score, that was based on outputs from that model. So based on low, medium, and medium high, and those levels based on the model. So I think that there are definitions around likelihood, and likelihood starts to drive various data sets, probably on 1 to 5 scale. If there's no data, we're not given. It's based on obvious gaps in the step change to the likelihood of it happening. So if it happens, I think it's if it's going to happen 1 to 5 days, it's a low likelihood, things like that. So, and that information is all in the methodology document. The solution effectiveness score is based on the percentage of questions that you answered that are aligned with that solution. So I skipped over kind of the solutions finder questions, but there is a series of questions here that you will answer. And if you, as you see, like you go here and you go adaptation, then you answer these questions. It's on the percentage of alignment with these questions here.
Okay.
So is it aligned with your operational cost? Is it a flooding, or is it a extreme heat? Do you have a mandate for green infrastructure solutions? So it's alignment with these questions, with your answers to the questions that are on the solutions finder.
Wonderful, thanks. So just to backtrack a little bit too, Sheri, so this is a tool that was developed for municipalities to help them with their climate work. And so folks who are working in post-secondary institutions, there are two types, right? Well, sort of. Like you've got the facilities people who are kind of managing a university and trying to help the university plan for climate resilience and mitigation, who could use this tool to help them. Those are the more facilities people. And then you have the instructors who could think about using this tool and inviting their students to explore it. And you went over the library and the learn section pretty quickly, but actually there's a ton of content in there, which means that instead of looking for a textbook or something, if you're trying to integrate climate adaptation or mitigation issues into your courses, like there's even a whole section on cost benefit analysis. If you're teaching accounting, that whole section on cost has got tons of stuff in there. So there's a ton of content here as well that, I think instructors could use either to develop their own teaching and learning materials, or direct their students towards the site to use it if they're maybe as anyway. What I just want to say is, like, there's so much there. So there's the map. There are these tools for designing it that maybe are for more like higher level students, maybe even grad students. But on a more introductory level, that the library and the introduction to the different tools and that learn section, there's like a lot of stuff there that could be really, really interesting for climate education post-secondary. So thank you, Sheri, for walking through this amazing resource. And now we don't necessarily have to share the screen now. Like I think there's not so many of us, so maybe we can just have a discussion together. And I'll invite my co-op student, Anushka, if you don't mind just sharing some questions in the chat. And maybe we can have a little think about, so for those of you who are post-secondary instructors, how do you think, like, which parts of this resource are most interesting and exciting to you? How do you think you might be able to use this in your teaching? I mean, some of you might also be able to use it with in your research. So Anushka has just posted a few questions in the chat there, and feel free to unmute yourself and just talk if you want to. You can write your thoughts in the chat, but we really welcome a lively conversation here if anybody wants to speak. Okay, Maria, go for it. Maria is one of our people from Waterloo.
Hi,
Thanks for
thank
joining
you.
us.
Thank you so much for sharing this. I just wanted to share that we recently ran kind of a pilot workshop with our students. I'm in systems design engineering to on nature-based solutions, and at first like introducing the concept, but then getting them to design, um, like think through an area. And we did like a whole design exercise where they consider different each person in the group gets a different solution. They each discuss how each might be applicable to that specific case. What are the co-benefits? Who does it impact? So we try to introduce both like the technical, but then the social aspects. We had to create all these. Well, we didn't have to, but we created a lot of these, let's say, information cards from scratch. So I just sent it to one of our students who's working on this to be like, oh, this is the perfect tool because actually it has a lot more information. One thing that we found really useful was having like physical material in front of the students. So I'm just wondering, like maybe it's really good because it's so flexible and you can kind of explore it, but I'm wondering how one might combine it with like the physical aspect of design and learning that is very important, I think, rather than getting like only using web interface. Do you have any thoughts about how to combine it with like a workshop where you draw and you use maps and kind of things like this?
Well, I think that the thing about a mapping, about geospatial and an interactive mapping tool online is that you can like click on and off the layers, right? So I think it would be difficult. But if you wanted to, I think if you wanted to go through the layers and then print off the and really dig into the rapid risk assessment if you could complete it online, and then you can download that PDF and then go through and assess, okay, how does this relate and how does this relate to my project? I think that you could take that finalized PDF, right? Physically take it with you and then compare it against whatever the other work you're doing, right? So there are exports that you can print and use. I think that really we really focus on trying to have an interactive experience to ease that user experience. So I'm not sure. Yeah, let me have a think on that. But as not an instructor, I can't imagine. You could probably also take take screenshots or take print off each of the different emissions calculator or test it against another emissions calculation method if you were going to use it that way, and check your answers or manipulate more of a like check it against a baseline or something, right? And do because we don't have a modeler for futures case yet on the cost calculator. So yeah, we could do something like that. And you could take a checklist, right? You could take the results checklist and go and take a look at each of those and see what applies and what does not. So I'm not
And
sure.
and maybe I missed this, but just like one aspect that we were missing was letting, and this is like more from my professional background, understanding that certain solutions are like on their own won't do much. They can be beautiful, they
Yeah.
can have a lot of promise, but in terms of actually mitigating the results uh, as a standalone, like they might not work,
Mhm.
depending on the size of the community, the precipitation. So I know there was something about effectiveness, but could you say to
Yeah.
what level are we at in terms of being able to actually see the effectiveness of the solution?
So yeah, so I think what you're referring to is we talked on each of the solutions cards. They have text, right? Text explanations of what the trade-offs are, what the factors are impacting feasibility, and things like that. We have 4 more versions of this coming up. So if there's and we're looking at energy modeling, including an energy modeling tool. We're looking at including a land tool, and then we're working on a cost benefit or a costing tool, so you could compare the different options and their effectiveness for your project. So those are tools that are coming up, if that's kind of what you're referring to. There is text there to give you some qualitative information about kind of how that's going to impact your project, but we don't have any quantitative as yet. It's hard to measure that, right, for a lot of things, but it's not something that's not on our plan for the future. So look at release 5, we're working on something similar, so maybe take a look in October next year or September next year, or 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that's what. And we might have a tool that's similar. But if again, we build this for our users. So if you're thinking about your own professional and you're willing to help us guide that, or you have ideas on that, you can email us at info@climateinsight.ca, or you can join one of our working groups and help us to design that. So that's really, I have a few academics on the call. I don't think they're on the call right now, but that are a part of our working group out of Royal Roads or out of other universities across, that actually help with our content design and that access to data. So we're excited about that group. They're great. So we can't do everything today, but we're trying.
Thanks very much.
No problem. I did see a question from Sheri about how we can use, I think it was a policy. How would we use this tool for advising policy? So I think we are designing it to advise municipal policy, right? So you could potentially, there's some suggestions there on developing green buildings policy and things like that. And if you can identify for your area on advising policy at a provincial or federal level, keeping in mind this is funded by the federal government, so it's really like, the policy is kind of there already and was mentioned in the latest federal budget, which is a really great thing. I think it's impacting policy itself, but if we get enough users in there going, okay, we know we have some climate hazards, it can really support some of those movements and those resolutions in municipalities when they move them forward and try to influence provincial policy as well. So I don't know if that answers your question, Sheri, but.
I just created a Google Doc because Sheri made a good suggestion also that we have like something to share. So so if anybody wants, I just shared the link in the chat to that, or just go ahead. I see Boshko, you've put some ideas in the chat there, so we'll add those to the Google Doc and we'll share them when we share the results. So any other thoughts from folks about how you might be able to use this resource? Like, how could you use this if some people left on the call are also instructors? Like, can you see yourselves using this to design some kind of either an in-class activity or an assignment for students, like some kind of an assessment where you might require them to use this website in one way or another? Any thoughts from folks who are teaching? Oh, Jenny.
Yeah, so among other things, I teach instructional design at Royal Roads University. And I have a group project for the class that I teach. They're master's level students in learning experience design. And I'm always looking for a subject to assign to the group to kind of pursue. And I can see, I mean, this is an amazing tool for lots and lots of reasons, but I can see that the ease of use is really strong. So those groups could actually just do pick a region and do a preliminary look at some of these things and start to think, okay, now I need to create a public education campaign. There's something I need to teach folks in the region, residential folks who need more information or folks who are living in housing that is at risk, all those kinds of things. So I can see that it really is a useful tool at kind of any undergrad, grad level for students to go exploring and to just do a preliminary what next, right? It's a great tool, and the preliminary data that it provides is a great place to hang your hat to do something else, whatever that something else is in kind of an assessment design. Do you think that's fair to say, Sheri, that the ease of use here would be good for, graduate level instructional designers looking to create some sort of public education?
Yeah, I would hope so. Jenny, that's huge praise to say that it's from an instructional designer. Like, that's amazing. So thank you for that. I wrote it down, actually, Jenny said, because that's amazing to hear from, because that was our intent, right, is to make the usability really right there. having gone through my master's program and course-based master's program, I think that's something I totally could have used this in some of that exploration of some of the impacts and applied solutions to climate infrastructure problems, like directed for that. So I think that would have been actually, yeah, thinking back into my course, that would have been actually really useful for some of our programs, for one of the classes. Yeah. Because that's the intent of once you're done and using it to go and use it in another session. It is a really great, I don't want to say practice tool, especially the rapid risk assessment. I think walking through that as a student would be an incredible project to show each of the questions you should be asking when you're thinking about risk and things like that, right? So I think that RRA with the tools it provides, because not only is it's really based on the questions that you answer, right? So that the students are answering. So if the students were using that RRA, I think that they could go through, and the questions are prompts to what information do I need to answer these questions? And it would give them further prompts to go and do the research on those things, find out what typical things would be from a specific municipality and things like that. So I think that's actually a really great way of incorporating that into a project.
Great, thanks. I'm just thinking of the, multi-interdisciplinary uses for it, right?
Yeah.
It's my students work in K-12, the corporate training and development, post-secondary. So they're going to be working with colleagues and faculty members trying to embed climate change, because it's interesting to most humans. And when you bring it and when you introduce it into the learning process, just as here's an easy example of something that you could do as a human being, there's often really strong engagement in trying to get into the weeds and start to solve this, or start to create again, education materials that are good for a variety of audiences. So thanks so much. I think there's a lot of interdisciplinary and applied use for the tool in kind of cool ways.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jenny. I'm hoping it's interdisciplinary, right? When I speak to high school classes, because I like to pop in and get judged by like I was in high school. No, I'm just kidding. I like to go in and talk to the high school students. One of the questions I ask them is what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to be when you grow up, basically? And then show them the connection to how that's impacted in climate change. And so I know I glossed over really quickly, but those social vulnerability factors, those apply to if you're working in social work, right? If you're working as a sociologist, if you're working in some of those people studies programs, right? Those are, I'm sure that tool could be used to say, okay, here's your social vulnerability assessment. Here is how climate's going to impact those things. Take it away and tell me which communities are going to impact them, what that actually looks on the ground, because here's your snapshot of what that looks like, right? So I do think it applies to multidisciplinary, and I'm glad to see that you can see that also. That was our intent. And if we're missing anybody, let me know, because we'll try to incorporate it. We have 4 more releases, so.
That's great. Any other thoughts from others about how you might use it? I see Sheri Ann is saying you might use it as an activity in your last class this semester. That's good. I'm also teaching a class next semester, and I'm thinking one of the assignments sort of inherited from somebody else is about kind of doing learning more about what's happening in your own community in terms of climate change. But I really love in the map all those layers about vulnerability. So it's not just climate impacts. It really depends on who's living there and what their capacity is to deal with those impacts too. So this is going to be a really good tool, and I'm going to get my students to go and explore as well, so they can put that together. Because there are other interactive maps like the Climate Atlas of Canada, for instance, that folks might know about, which is a great tool too, but it doesn't capture all of these social vulnerability layers that are in this map as well.
Well, and that's what we really, really were intent on. There are a couple of other tools, which you'll see we refer to from Climate Insight. Healthy Plan City has a good tool that kind of layers some different social factors on there as well. But that was really, we get the best feedback on the fact that we are layering our equity layers with our climate layers and our infrastructure. Like I haven't seen another tool that does all 3 of those things. And so, and that's what we're working on kind of moving forward, right? So, yeah.
Jay's just made a suggestion here. Jay, do you feel like unmuting yourself and talking?
Oh, sure. I'm just a fly on the wall here, but I always really like practical things. And if there was some section on the website that how others have used this tool, how like maybe some case studies of how others have used it and actually and implemented some of the suggestions that come from the website, that may be helpful.
Yeah, thanks for that. I will, again, I'll kind of see if we can have a case study for that. We do include on the training, on the Learn page, there's a section that's training and events. And there's some like 90-second walkthroughs, but we haven't yet gotten a municipality or a user to say, hey, this is how I used it in this situation. Though I do have a few users that I can totally tap to write something about that. And New Glasgow actually is one of our biggest promoters. And every time I talk to Rohan, who's their climate mitigation, he says, "Did you build this for me?" Because it actually it's the information he's looking for. So if you ever look at our LinkedIn, you'll see Rohan's testimonials all over that because they have used it to inform the building of all of their climate action work. So, but yeah, featuring that, we get that request from our funder as well, right? Hey, we need some concrete examples of the municipalities that are using this. And so I think that might be something we'll include in the future for our training session.
And maybe in terms of post-secondary institutions, like with our ACE project, the one on accelerating climate education, we might be able to gather some case studies and have them on our project website, but we could share them with you as well if you wanted to include that somewhere on your website, how post-secondary instructors have used this resource and have some examples on it. Like definitely I could help you write, and maybe some others on the call here would be interested in that. Like we could write a list of suggestions about how you might use it. And actually everybody's contributed lots of ideas here in the
Oh, I'm taking those ideas.
So we have a few already to start with, and then maybe that would be helpful for post-secondary folks. But for sure, from the Climate Institute side, when we're pointing people to the resource, we can speak to that a little bit, Jay, for folks to give them an idea about how they can use it. Because you could certainly use it in lots of different ways. It depends what you're teaching too. Like so if people are teaching planning or teaching architecture, you can see like all that information about different buildings and everything like that. There's a lot there for them. But making it more inclusive for folks from other disciplines too.
For sure. And if anybody, if after this call, if you go in and you do incorporate in your classroom, please tag me in it, shoot me an email and let me know how effective it was or whatever else. I love to hear that feedback, and it really does help us. And especially from two different angles, right? The usability, because your students might be new to this or whatever else. So it helps us get feedback there. And then if the content is useful and applicable and you're challenging it, that's amazing. And it comes out that it's really applicable for your use. Please let us know any of those stories that they do help us in the further development. And that ties into, I see if there's a question in the chat from Kirit. Hi, Kirit. Expanding on what the roadmap is looking like for the next few versions. So right now for version 4 will be released in April, and that one is going to have what we're working on is a housing element. So it will break down kind of what the different applications are from the options for a house, like a specific house, because we're looking at things like that, some of the different infrastructure options as applicable housing with the budget coming in the way it is. And then we do monthly updates. So our next update, which I just approved right now for content, is embodied carbon. And that's going to, there's a big 25 pieces of content cards, we call them, that are going up to talk about tools and case studies and CSGs, like codes and standards around embodied carbon. In January, we're having the release will be on some hazard assessment stuff. So to drive home the point of that risk assessment, the rapid risk assessment tool, some flooding stuff. And then in February, we're starting with some new case studies, some unique case studies that tie into our options. So that's our content that's coming up in the next few months. Following versions, I talked a little bit about that, the land use calculator. We're partnering with SSG, which is Sustainable Systems Group, to improve our greenhouse gas, like our baseline emissions modeling tool, and improve it so it's actually a model tool and not just a baseline emissions calculator. So we're seeing how that works right now. And we're also looking at their land tool, which is really great because it shows kind of the pieces of land and what a community, like a neighborhood or a development would look like in that area for its land impact. So that's what's coming up right away. Again, because it's an iterative process, and we're really based on feedback from our community and what is needed. Some of the things we're floating around are trying to find a natural asset tool, or improving our natural asset content, so that people who are focusing on nature-based solutions, like I think Maria was talking about earlier, can kind of compare and contrast a little bit in there. A cost tool that's coming out to kind of assess the operational versus capital costs of resilience versus climate resilient projects or solutions versus like base model. I can talk about this. Like just meeting the building code requirements versus increasing and trying to show that balance between that cost differential between those two. That's some of the stuff we're working on going forward. And then what comes along, it's all based on available data and requests from the users on how to make it better. So we really do rely on our working groups to bring the most accurate information and the most up-to-date information and applicable and what's usable by our user groups. So that's kind of a snapshot into the future.
Well, hopefully you're going to get a whole bunch of new user groups that from post-secondary institutions using it in various ways. I'd love that too. So we'll do what we can to continue to promote the use of this really cool resource. And I want to thank Sheri. We'll start to wrap it up, I think, now. Thank you so much for all sharing this really juicy, in-depth website with us. There's so much there. It'd take a lot of time to explore, and I think probably people want to go back and explore some more. And please do share with your colleagues. And so thank you very much, Sheri, for joining us. And I'm just going to go back to my slides just for a second, just to wrap up. Hopefully you're seeing the slide. Okay. So just to encourage everybody to keep in touch if you're interested in climate change education and post-secondary, and you want to keep in touch about our ACE project and find out about upcoming events. Like one upcoming event I can let you know about is from February 2nd to the 5th. Wait, 2nd to the 5th, we're going to be hosting a national forum on climate change education and post-secondary, which again mostly focuses on those target disciplines I mentioned, but everybody's welcome to that. So we'll have a series it's virtual, this event, and we'll have a series of events over the course of that week that will give an opportunity for instructors and other folks from universities and also practitioners to talk to each other and share ideas. And I'm sure this might come up again in some of those sessions as well. Some of the folks maybe who are present here will share them, because there'll be a lot of opportunities for sharing resources and sharing strategies for integrating climate education in there. So if you're interested in climate education and you're not already on our project mailing list to find out about the Waterloo Climate Institute, what we're doing, there's the QR code will take you to the sign up page, and we will share the slides with you afterwards also. And we also welcome, we're doing a newsletter, not too often, like maybe twice a semester. And if there's anything going on at your post-secondary institution or in your community, or some kind of a resource that you know of that would be also useful for post-secondary instructors, we're happy to include that kind of stuff in the newsletter and even on our project website as well. And also, recently we started up a LinkedIn group for people who are interested in talking to each other about climate education. So far, it seems to be mostly me and sometimes Jenny posting opportunities and resources, but you're welcome to join that group if you do use LinkedIn, and it's really meant to be a forum for sharing information about resources. If people want to share syllabi or anything like that, it's a great forum to be able to do that. So we welcome people to join that. I think we have about 100 people from across the country already who have joined it. A good chunk of them are post-secondary instructors, but we have some other people, because a lot of people are interested in what happens in universities and what are we teaching the next generation too. So there are other folks in there as well. And with that, I'd like to wrap it up and say thanks everybody who attended, and another special thanks to ICLEI and to Sheri for taking the time to share this cool resource with everybody. Also, I'd love to invite you to fill in an evaluation form. We'll email everybody and we'll provide a link, but there's that QR code will take you to the evaluation form for this session as well. And we'd love to hear from you in that also about future events, or even throw something in the chat, like other things that would be useful for people that we can help put together. And we're happy to have other guests walk folks through resources like this. This is going to be a hard act to follow, though, because it's such a big and cool resource. But there are other things going on, so we'd love to hear from you. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And any last words from anybody?
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for taking the time. So thanks everybody, and have a great weekend. And if you are in Southern Ontario, enjoy the snow. Or other parts of the country where you've got some
Southern Alberta as well.
Yes, enjoy the snow over there too. Okay, thanks so much, everybody. And we're going to be posting a recording of this. We'll do that early next week and send out the slides too. By the way, one little note, the slides, there's a little bonus at the end, because the last webinar we did focused on climate change education resources. So I included a bunch of slides with all kinds of resources. So we'll just share those with you again. Okay, great. Thanks so much. Thanks, Sheri. Thanks, everybody. And take care. Bye-bye.